much, Hello Balakrishnan. I'm delighted to be with all of you today. I'm impressed to see the huge turnout of some 250 listening into this conversation. And I do want to say that the virtual training program for competitive examination preparations, as part of the overall package that you have presented to us, is really a wonderful, wonderful accomplishment of the Adani Foundation. And I want to start by congratulating all of you associated with that foundation for this project and the work you're doing. As the Member of Parliament for Thiruvananthapuram, I'm especially pleased to note that the bright young men and women of Vinyam are to be the beneficiaries of the program. I'm confident that they will benefit from the training and coaching that this program has put together following the initial pilot in August 2019 at the organization's CSR office in Mukola and among members of the Karakolam Residents Association, where I gather 118 individuals have registered. You've sent me the list. I'm very impressed. Both genders and of course, all communities very well represented there. I'm also happy to see the commitments and involvement of the Adani Foundation in contributing to the development of local communities and stakeholders, whether it be through your CSR programs that focus on skill development and education, such as the one I'm inaugurating today, or should it be through your community health programs that are of increasing importance in the pandemic-affected community that we are surrounded by today. Trivandrum, unfortunately, is one of the worst affected districts of Kerala. Or whether it's through the number of local infrastructure development projects that you have organized, particularly in the wards of Mullur, Kottapuram and Vinyam, among others. Now, I don't see these projects as just feel-good or charitable endeavors, as some mistakenly assume CSR projects to be. I think my friend MP Joseph will agree with me. CSR is about the willingness of your foundation to recognize that such activities can help strengthen and build up the capacity of the community with which the larger business can flourish. In fact, when the concept of corporate social responsibility first began to build momentum in the global community, I was at the United Nations. And in those days, it used to be pitched as a purely philanthropic endeavor. It was my good friend and mentor, the former UN Secretary General, the late Kofi Annan, who used his attendance as Secretary General of Davos in the World Economic Forum in 1997, January, to position CSR as being in the interests of business too. When he called for a new partnership between the UN and the global private sector, which led to what we call the Global Compact, under which businesses promised to adhere to UN human rights, labor, and environmental principles. I was obviously with him at that time. His appeal was extremely well received right across Davos as offering a credible and universal framework for business to act responsibly. And as Adam put it, we cannot be secure amid starvation. We cannot build peace without alleviating poverty. We cannot build freedom on foundations of injustice. And it is the same principle that today underlines CSR in India. Of course, we could argue that this has gone well with our cultural traditions, which have always embraced philanthropy as a crucial standard of ethical business, and more importantly, ethical living, as attested to by several of our ancient texts, including the works of Kautilya, among others. It is in the interest of businesses to help alleviate the conditions that threaten the well-being of Indians, and therefore of the national environment within which they do business. This is not profiteering or a farcical exercise, as cynics who dismiss CSR often like to point out. It's rather a willingness to strategically invest in capacity building amongst local communities. And I think that really helps a serious business like yours to achieve your larger goals as well. Now, it's fitting that we're inaugurating this virtual competitive exam prep program today, August 12th, which is recognized as International Youth Day. You know, our National Youth Day is in January, Swami Vivekananda's birthday, but internationally, today is International Youth Day. And as the policymaker, I've often stressed how vital the importance of skilling and education are in providing youthful India with the necessary tools and access to opportunities that will not just allow these young men and women to lead a fulfilling and empowered life, but indeed take our nation to new heights. Let's look at the trends among the Indian population. We're now living at a time where over 65% of our 1.38 billion citizens are under the age of 35. 50% or 50.1% are under the age of 25. And 287 million Indians fall in the 10 age group where the foundations of their educational upbringing takes place. Now, this is at a time when the average age in Europe is 46, in Japan it's 47, even in so-called youthful USA it's 40, whereas in India the average age is currently 29. So we are truly a young country in terms of. I think you could perhaps mute the mics of all the others. A lot of disturbances coming to me. You can mute everybody else and just keep me connected. You'll hear me better, I'm sure. So anyway, I just wanted to say that if you were to look at the way in which over 116 million Indians are currently falling in the job starter category of people aged 19 to 23, whereas in our neighbor and the manufacturing giant of China, it's only 94 million. And this gap is going to increase, by the way. In the next 20 years, there will be a contraction in the labor force in China and, of course, North America and Europe, whereas in India, our labor force will increase by 32%. So all of these figures attest to the immense potential of our labor force to power India's development in the years to come. And it's because it's young people. But this opportunity to develop a demographic dividend for our country could as easily become a demographic disaster if we don't train and skill our people to take advantage of the opportunities available in the 21st century. In fact, right now, as we know, our unemployment figures have now reached a 4-decade high. It had already begun to happen before the pandemic disaster. Now it has reached, ever since numbers could have been recorded of unemployment, we have broken all those numbers, all those records. Unemployment is at all-time highs in our country. Also, from an educational perspective, we have 431 million compatriots who remain illiterate. We have more children who have not seen the inside of a school than any other country in the world. And though we have over 487 million people in our workforce, 2/3 of employers are claiming they're struggling to find employable workers. In fact, they have to spend additional resources to train new employees to bring them up to speed with the expectations of the company. And that's why I welcome what you are doing, because these stark realities are not something that can be solved by any government or political party. It will require conscious efforts from all quarters in the private sector as well. Skilling, educational institutes, civil society organizations, your CSR projects, all of these must come together with the youth of today to equip them with the necessary training and tools to power that can help them to truly power and lead the India of tomorrow. Now, I'm here to inaugurate the competitive examination project, and though I've personally not been an advocate of competitive examinations, I did rather well in them myself as a young person. And I'll tell you why I don't advocate them despite doing well in them. It's because they're a snapshot of a child's ability rather than a comprehensive movie of their overall talents. Still, there remains very little doubt in the hearts and minds of most Indian families and students that successfully navigating through these exams can unlock strong opportunities for our youth. The numbers themselves speak to the soaring popularity that these examinations continue to enjoy, as well as the highly competitive nature that dominates examinations in our country. You know that in 2018, those are the most recent figures I got, 17.5 lakh candidates applied for the UPSC examinations. We've just celebrated the results of this year's UPSC results that came out. Of the 17.5 lakh candidates, 8 lakh students appeared for the prelims. Only 10,000 students qualified for the mains. And then out of that 10,000, only 2,000 appeared for the interview. And half of those, 1,056, secured posts in one of the national services. So when you think about it, 17.5 lakh candidates whittled down to 1,000 victors. That's the kind of intensity of our competitive examination process. In the private sector, the IIMs are the gold standard. Well, the last figures I saw for the common admissions test for IIMs almost 2 lakh students appeared, of which 3,335 candidates were successful. So a 1.7% success rate amongst applicants. When you realize that amongst those who apply to Harvard or Yale, 10 to 11% are admitted, you can see that Indians are fighting for attention and admission and entry and prospects in a much more competitive environment. So I want to say that in our national level examples, given the twin factors of a large proportion of our population seeking jobs and economic opportunities, and the limited number of openings and vacancies, these are realities that percolate across the board, including in state-level entrance examinations, like we saw in the KEAM exam, which I had advised the Chief Minister not to hold. He went ahead and held them anyway. 1.2 lakh Keralites braved the pandemic to give the exam because that was the importance of the paper in their lives. And that resulted, as we know, in multiple cases of COVID infection. That's why I advised against holding the exam. But the exams are sacrosanct. People take them all the time. In Madhya Pradesh, a couple of years ago, the police department advertised for 14,000 constable jobs. A constable job requires an 8th grade pass. You don't even need to be a high school diploma certificate. What do they get for these 14,000 vacancies? 9 lakh candidates, which included 10,000 engineering graduates, almost 2 lakh graduates, 15,000 postgraduates, and about 200 PhDs. That's the kind of crisis in our country today. So, of course, you're doing a great job in trying to equip our children to take these competitive examinations and do better. The lucrative value that many ascribe to competitive examinations certainly point to the fault lines in our highly unequal society, but this is not the forum to talk about that. I know that the importance of adequate training and preparation for these exams is what I would like to highlight today. We know there's an industry that's come up for profit to equip prospective candidates for these examinations. But it gets worse than that in an entire city like Kota in Rajasthan. The whole city is devoted to premier coaching institutes. There are something like 1.6 lakh students every year going to Kota, paying exorbitant fees to be grilled and prepared for their upcoming tests. In Kerala, we have Pala, where there are some tutorial centers, but nothing as big as Kota. In Delhi, where our parliament and our national capital is, coaching establishments have sprung up en masse. But access to coaching centers is not an easy proposition, and it's an expensive proposition. One has to have a certain degree of financial privilege to access these institutions. In fact, some of these institutions have become so difficult that they actually hold entrance exams themselves. So only the really capable and financially well-off students get in. Now, there were physical and financial barriers for coaching establishments in the pre-COVID world. During the pandemic, our students have to contend not only with those physical and financial barriers, but new barriers like access to the digital divide, which has become a more and more stark reality of India today. We, of course, are all living in a world brought to us by Facebook, Google, and Twitter, and WhatsApp, but we also live in a world where over 3.7 billion individuals do not have access to the internet, including 1 billion children for whom it will not be possible to either work remotely or learn remotely. According to UNESCO, globally, just over half the households in the world have an internet connection, 55%. And in the developed world, 87% are connected, whereas in the developing world, it's 47%, and in the least developed countries, it's 19%. So these stark realities, along with other barriers like infrastructure deficiencies, basic access to 24/7 electricity, we cannot take for granted, not even me in Delhi, reliable Wi-Fi, frequent breakdowns in Wi-Fi or inadequate broadband problems, teachers equipped to use digital curriculums. All of these have resulted in insuperable barriers for the weak and marginalized in our society, often forcing some of them to take extreme steps in their desperation. Some of you will recall the sobering and tragic event from Kasaragod or Kannur, where a class 10 student hailing from a Dalit family, a young girl who was a class topper up to class 10, and under any other circumstances would have been set for a bright future, committed suicide. Why? Because during the pandemic, the classes went online. She, of course, had no internet in her home, or she never had a phone. Her family, the sole breadwinner was her father, who was a daily wage worker. He couldn't afford a smartphone, and he couldn't even afford to repair the one broken TV set the family had, which would have allowed this girl to follow the classes necessary to continue her education. That's why she felt her life and future were destroyed. She committed suicide. This is the reality of the India we live in. And I thank Adani Foundation for coming up with all the things you presented to us, the G Suites and from Google and all of that, because you are making it possible for our children in Vizhinjam, our young people in Vizhinjam, to leap over the barriers that unfortunately cause the digital divide. Let me thank the foundation then for developing a more level playing field. Let me commend the Adani Foundation for the work it is doing, and particularly extending their work to those who otherwise would not have access to such material and guidance that the better off are able to do. And thank you for taking cognizance of the fact that not everyone is on the right side of the digital divide, like those attending perhaps today, and that you need solutions to these problems. So once again, I'm very grateful to the Adani Foundation for doing this virtual training program. I'm also very pleased that you've honored me by inviting me to inaugurate it. I know there are very distinguished speakers waiting to take their turn. I know Mr. Joseph personally. He works with me in the All India Professionals Congress. Mr. Roy Chaudhary, Mr. Jatin Trivedi, many other distinguished people. So I will leave you to continue your meeting. But let me, as we say in Kerala, we officially inaugurate this meeting. Jai Hind.